TheVoice17104.com. This is Zanetta Wingfield, and you're listening to TheVoice17104.com. TheVoice17104.com.
Welcome, my brothers and sisters, to the Richard James Show on 17104, The Voice. Greetings, my friend. It's good to see you. It's good to be seen again. We have a beautiful day. Things are happening in the world, and we're going to get right to it. We gave you a show last week on Minister Louis Farrakhan. You know, we don't have a lot of great leaders like we've had in the past. People like men like El Shabazz or Malcolm X, people like the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, people like Bernard Rustin, people like Marcus Garvey, back in the day, Paul Robeson, those kind of leaders. And each time when we had a great leader, we had some kind of interference or assassination that has taken place with those leaders. Whitney Young, who was a master swimmer, died in 3 feet of water. In other words, some elements of our society consider leaders in the African American community as their enemies. Well, we have a great leader that's, I think he's in his 90s, a brilliant man, a very capable man. He's had some medical issues that he's been able to overcome, but I've just listened to some of his speeches and the things that he's said, and he's trying desperately to bring people together, good people who have a conscience, people who want to do good and to improve the lives of individuals who are either poor or just discriminated against because of their race. He was able to pull off, and we mentioned this before, a million-man march in which there was nearly 2 million people at that march. And that was, I think, in 1995. I was there, and I mentioned that it was a meaningful occasion. Is one that I will remember and take with me to my grave, to see almost 2 million men of color coming together, no weapons, not for violent confrontation, not to perpetuate hate against any group, but to lift up and to come together as one and try to understand that the power for change and improvement in our community lies within ourselves. And that's the important thing, that instead of trying to rely on the ones that destroyed us or hurt us or enslaved us, rely on ourselves to try and improve our community. And also stop blaming other people for our own issues and our own problems. If there's violence in our community, if there's domestic abuse, if there's child abuse, and we're doing it against each other, well, who then, the devil, are you going to blame? You're going to say this happened because, because slave masters made you be? No, we have got to learn, number one, to take responsibility for who and what we are, and be about the business of bringing about change. And we understand that march did have some very positive effects in many ways, but we still have issues that we have to deal with. And then there was a follow-up march, Justice or Else march took place. And it was a thing, in other words, we want justice or else, but the else is not one of violence or attacking anybody else, it's or else has to be uh, turned toward us. We have to look at the man in the mirror and hoping and helping him to change his ways and understanding that you cannot blame others for people know would do things and want to first identify themselves as being the victim. Well, that's crazy. We've got to start doing things in our own community. And this is kind of message that I hear from Louis Farrakhan. Clean up your own community. Uh, Pull together what resources you have and create businesses that will create decent jobs. And with unity and with the resources that we have, we can do it. And this man, and I don't know how long he's gonna live, how long he's gonna be with us, but God knows we need to listen to some of the things that he has to say that will help us along the way. Now we do have a video. We're going to take a look at that video, and then we won't be able to see all of it because I think it's 3 hours long, but we will take a look at it, and then we're going to do an analysis of that video. Okay. All right. Well, let's roll it. We'll see what he has to say. Bye-bye.
I just want to repeat this again because I think it's a very important thing for people to understand. There's a distinction between the thermometer and the thermostat. And we had this conversation when we were away, and it hit me, it touched me. So a lot of people can come in the room. The thermometer tells you what the temperature is. Very few people can come in the room, and there are thermostats that change the temperature. There's so much I could say about this brother as a beloved leader of African Americans, and also as a beloved friend. But we all know the wonderful work this man has done, and he's going to give us the time to discuss any and everything you and I want to ask, brother, and also the callers. Without further ado, I introduce the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Brother Mtume, thank you. And to all of your listeners, I wish you peace. And to Bob Slade, who is absent this morning, we pray that Almighty God, Allah, will bless you with a speedy recovery so you can get back to these microphones and feed the public as you have been doing for so many years.
Indeed.
I'm honored beyond words to be here with my family at KISS FM.
Well, let me ask you a question about leadership, and certainly your leadership over the last 15 years, especially in organizing the Million Man's March and the Millions More Movement March, I think is an example of the quality of your leadership, as well as the vision of that, the best possible folks coming forward to provide that leadership to us.
I think the best of us is yet to come. The best of us is like the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught me once. He said, there's a force in the universe that in the darkness, a star is being born. And you can't see it, but then that force that's in the darkness will bring that star into view. What that is telling us is we are never bereft of leadership. When leaders fail us, or when good leaders die, that same force that is in the universe that makes new stars and brings them into view will bring new leadership into view. And new leadership is required among black people because there is a sickness in our leadership. I don't want to put myself apart from them, except that I do that sets me apart. I will not place myself beyond our brothers and sisters in leadership, because none of us have done all that we should or all that we could. But having said that, there is a sickness, a disease in black leadership. Let me give you an example.
Yes, sir.
Mother Coretta Scott King, a woman that sacrificed much for us as the wife of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The children of Mrs. King, willingly or unwillingly, paid a tremendous price Sometimes we are ungrateful to those who have suffered to make life better for each and every one of us. But when Mother King passed, Harry Belafonte, our esteemed brother, who did so much to help Dr. King, who did so much to back the family, was disinvited to share a word from that platform on behalf of Mother King, because he had made some disparaging remarks against President Bush. And now Bush was coming, Clinton was coming, Carter was coming, white folks were coming. So we could disrespect one of our own because of this sickness in us, that if they don't approve of us, we do not approve of one another. That leadership, that quality of leadership that will only keep their hand in our hand as long as we don't step out of line with white folk. That quality of leadership must be overthrown. And a quality of leadership must arise that will never disrespect and be ungrateful to the masses of black people and never compromise principle because the former slave masters and their children are in the house. Brother Akbar said there's a syndrome among black people. No matter what we say or what we do, we respond like this. I wonder what Massa gonna think about that. That's a Negro syndrome. So black leaders can't speak as forcefully as they could or they should, because I wonder what Massa gonna think about that. Oh, Lord, have mercy. Massa giving us money. And Lord, if I say too much, Massa gonna stop giving me money. So I can't talk like I know I should talk. And that's why they, like Nicodemus, they can meet Jesus in the dark, in the back, and say, I'm with you, brother. But when it comes to leading our people, they can only take us so far. And that's why that young cadre of leadership, those stars that are being born in the darkness, they must rise now and come forth without the poison of loving others more than you love yourself, and wanting to please others before you please yourself.
Another part,
and God will never violate his word, as these false people have promised us. And lastly, when my brother Tavis held up two papers, one a letter from the leader of the Republican National Committee, one from the leader of the Democratic National Committee, these were words from persons who are a part of the liars, the deceivers, who have promised us. And what I said in my few minutes, you're not dealing with the real powers. That man can give you a promise that he can't fulfill, because there are powers behind him that can undermine anything that he says. Go to the White House and get a promise from the president. He's not the power in America. He's a front man for power. So when you don't know who you're dealing with, you take the lies and deceit of these people into your heart. I am telling you, black America, don't you believe the false promises of your former slave masters and their children. And that's why the Bible says we war not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and the rulers of the darkness of this world and spiritual wickedness that is in high places. And none of us are sitting down with those boys that pull those strings. So any promise made by anyone else, don't pay it any mind.
All right, let's go. Let's stay out in New Jersey and let's speak with Ken. Good morning, Ken. You're on open line.
Yes, brothers. Thank you, brother minister, for being here today. And also, too, I have to disagree with you about the book, The Covenant, because the book, I read the book, and it still relies too much on the government, okay? I mean, at the end of every chapter, it states, you know, go to your local official, okay? And to me, it's still looking towards the government. And I called in the day after Tavis appeared on the show. that day rather, when Tavis appeared. And it seemed to me Tavis' anger carried on to the next day about after you appeared. It seemed that, they wasted 20 minutes of time to basically disallow what you had just said at the State of the Black Union. And also, we as a people, I think we have to unite with the African people around the world. Okay, I think we need a membership in the African Union. Okay, I think, African Americans deserve a voice to speak on an international level. We have to take that voice to the African Union and let it speak for us, and let other African leaders, help us in our cause here. And also, too, the 8th Pan-African Congress is in Harare, Zimbabwe this year in October. Will you be attending? And do you suggest that we attend?
All right,
Thank you, brother. No, I'm in total agreement with you. See, that's the weakness of the book. The covenant spells out clearly our condition, but it also spells out our impotence because we're relying on the same people that have deceived us all along. And that's why I say we have to make a covenant with God, because he never breaks his promise. If we rely on God and rely on the best within ourselves, then we can solve this problem. Now, dear brother, yes, I have been to the African Union. I was there when it was being formed, and I hope to we've pressed them for observer status with the African Union, and I think we will be there with our brothers and sisters in Africa when they have their next meeting, hopefully sometime in July. I would advise you, yes, go to Harare. It's time to stand by President Mugabe. And it's a wonderful thing that the 8th Pan-African Congress will be held there, because he's under fire. Remember, Mugabe was the darling of the Commonwealth nations as long as he let white folk keep the land. But when they impressed upon him, look, President Mugabe, you and Joshua Nkomo, you fought to take the land back because the land belongs to the people. And just before he was to win and take over, they invited him to London, and they made a deal. And in that deal, they were going to buy back the land of the whites, and then they reneged on their promise. And then after 20 years or so, the soldiers came and said, look, man, this is not what we fought for. So he began to take the land away from the whites and reapportion it to the blacks, and that's when the Commonwealth got on him, and now he's the bad boy, and they're working to destroy that man. So all the support we can give to Brother Mugabe is what we should do. Thank you for your question.
Mr. Farrakhan, when we come back after this break, I want to follow up on that same question about our relationship to Africa and ask you about the Sudan and the Darfur issue. You're listening to Open Line. We're with Minister Louis Farrakhan. Stay tuned. Call up people. Let them know he's on the air. We'll be right back. What's your take on what's going on in Sudan and the atrocity that's occurring in Darfur, and the fact that the black community here and the black leadership seems not to be embracing that issue?
First, my brother, when we were called Negroes, we did not have an international presence. The Honorable Marcus Garvey tried to give us an international presence, and of course he was very successful, but the government feared an international presence. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad single-handedly turned us from Negroes to accepting ourselves no matter what shade of color we were, due to the Willie Lynch syndrome and the going in and out of our women by our former slave masters and their children, that gave us all these different shades, and then they divided us by these shades. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad asked us to refer to ourselves as the black man, the original people of the earth. And when we saw ourselves as black people, then every person of color on the earth, we identified with them. So in the 60s, nothing could happen on the African continent that black people people in America were not concerned with. Nothing could happen in the Caribbean or in Brazil or in Central America or in the islands of the Pacific, where black people were concerned that we didn't feel them, because a nervous system was being created for black people, that we felt the pain of one another wherever we were on the earth. But after Malcolm was assassinated, and Martin was assassinated, and Elijah Muhammad was gone, notice the shift in language. We were no longer black. In New York City, there were several black shows. There was Black News. Was there Positively Black? There was the national program with Tony Brown called Black Journal.
Right.
After the death of these giants, now the wise people said, let's change the language so we can change their focus and give them a new understanding of who they are. So subtly, there was no more Black News, no more Positively Black. Black Journal became Tony's Journal. And all over America, wherever black was describing that program, Black Star in Baltimore, that left. And then the new language was the minority, the disadvantaged. Then came African American. And what was happening is a severing of the nervous system that black had made, tying us to the struggle of black people all over the world. So now there can be a Darfur. Who cares? That's not us. There can be a Rwanda and Burundi. Who cares? That's not us. So we don't feel suffering until there's a Katrina. Oh, that's us. But what's going on in Haiti, that's not us. What's going on in Brazil, in Costa Rica, in Colombia, in Nicaragua, in Guatemala, that is not us. So the language shift. Now let's go to Darfur. If you notice, on the mall, 95% of those who were present were Caucasian. I'm not going to denigrate their sensitivity to suffering, but the reason that blacks were not there is because the blacks who could make something happen were never invited. It's not that black people don't care about Darfur, but Darfur, on the scale of suffering in the world, pales, because now I heard there were 180,000 dead, from that to 400,000, okay? 2 million displaced. But in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, 3.5 million have died. No talk. In northern Uganda, with the Lord's Resistance Army and the walking at night for the children trying to run away so that they would not be kidnapped and made to fight against the government in Kampala. No talk. Why Sudan? For the last 15 years, Sudan has been on the agenda for regime change. Regime change because Sudan housed Palestinian resistance fighters. Sudan housed Osama bin Laden and put him out. But Sudan is an Islamist regime that is against the state of Israel. Now let's stop there for a moment. See, now they said, well, these are some Arabs in the Sudan enslaving Africans. So naturally, this is the language of Arabs enslaving Africans. This is so clever, and the media pushes that so that there would come a natural hatred of blacks for Arabs, so that Arabs look like the real culprits here. Well, you don't know this, but I and my national, international representative, Akbar Muhammad, who's in the studio with me, who I want to speak on this in just a few moments, he and I were together on a peace mission. Listen to me carefully now. How many years ago was that, Brother Akbar? Over 10 years ago, wasn't it?
It was 1994.
1994, 12 years ago. Now, I went to Ghana and spoke with then President Jerry John Rawlings. And Rawlings said, if you want to help ease the crisis, get in touch with Kenneth Kaunda, the former president of Zambia. We got in touch with Kenneth Kaunda, and he said he would accompany us. And so we went to Kenya and met with President Arap Moi, who at that time was over that group of nations that were working for peace. What is it?
IGAD.
IGAD, E-G-A-D. So when we met with President Moi, he sent us to Uganda, where we met with President Museveni. But the most important meeting was a meeting with Brother John Garang, who for 20 years was fighting the government in Khartoum. Now, why was there a fight? Was it over slavery? Akbar, you were with me. At no time during our talk with John Garang, which was 4 hours in length, was there ever a mention of slavery.
Right, never mentioned.
But when I mentioned the word justice, then John Garang's wife broke down and cried and said that I was the only person who came that talked about justice. Now, what was the injustice? The Arabs have mixed their blood with the Africans that live in the north. They are Arabized and Islamic. And the same racist poison that has poisoned the bloodstream of Islam has made the Arab North feel superior to the Christian animist African South. The South is black, 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 so black till there's blue in their color. So when you have, like the enemy has done to us, when you're lighter, you think you're better than your black brother or sister. And in New Orleans, when I just left there, they told me about the brown bag, that if you walked in a place and you couldn't pass the brown bag test, meaning your color was darker than the bag that you carry your liquor in, you couldn't go in certain places. And in Washington, D.C., y'all know that there was an elitist attitude among light-skinned black people against dark-skinned black people. The same game that the enemy has played here and in Africa. Now he's dominating that scene now in Sudan. Now look at the Sudan. It's the largest landmass country, I think.
That's right.
On the African continent. If it were fully developed, it could feed all of Africa. In the south, there's an abundance of oil. And if you remember in Nigeria, in the eastern part of Nigeria, they wanted to break that part off years ago and call it Biafra. And it ignited a civil war. And the civil war was to unite that which gave them power, because there was a regime in Lagos that the government of America and Britain did not like. Now what you got in the West, Brother Akbar, tell the audience, because I sent Brother Akbar there to look into the situation in Darfur, and James M. Toomey went himself. Tell them about the Janjaweed, tell them about the government, tell them about the farmers, tell them about the herders, tell them what is really happening on the ground there, and then we'll come back to why no black people were there on that mall.
Yes, Brother Minister, with your permission, first, thank you very much. I'd like to say to the audience, you know, we have a saying, when there's darkness, stand still. And most black people in America did not participate because the cloud that was around it that they really didn't understand. And then they were not invited in mass. They tried to get some to come. So the standing still is because they've heard so many different things. One of the things I want to start off where the minister left off at, when that peace accord was signed in the South, immediately this conflict broke out in the West. Now, until the last 5 days, most people in America knew nothing about the rebel group that started all of this. They had a peace accord in Abuja. The Sudanese government said that they would sign. The rebels first resisted. Bush sent the deputy secretary of state there to force the rebels. Now, how could you force the rebels to sign unless you got some clout with them, or were you supplying them with money and weapons and so forth, and you told them that this is what you have to do at that time? But the tragedy is that if you look at the government in Khartoum, Now, whenever we look at the world and you talk about a government, Brother Minister, if you talked about Iraq during the time of Saddam Hussein, they'd show his picture. If you talked about Syria, they would show Assad. If you talked about Saudi Arabia today, they would show King Abdullah. If you talk about Egypt, they would show Mubarak. They've talked about the Sudan, but if I asked an audience across this country, what does the president of the Sudan look like? Most people do not know. He just went to Iran to meet with the leader of Iran, and very little information showing him in a picture with him, because he is as black as Akbar or either blacker. So he doesn't fit the script of the Arab who's killing Africans. Last week, the Washington Post published the 5 facts about Darfur. One of them on there that was blaring, and Mtumi, you can bear witness to this, is that all of the people are black. So if you talk about Arabs killing Africans, and Mtumi, you went into a room when you were there. I went into the same room, and the man said, would the Arab tribe leaders stand up, that include the ones that are called Janjaweed? And when they stood up, they were all black. He said, now will the African tribes stand up? And they were all black. And so everybody, we looked at each other, because the picture in America is that these white Arabs are killing Africans. And the brother said clearly, what makes them the Arabs, they only speak Arabic, and they're herders, or you would call nomads. They do herding. What makes them Africans is they speak an African language and Arabic. They're all Muslims, and so they've had this clash for 500 years. This conflict with the rebels exacerbated it, because the government did go in and form a militia. And this militia was not to make people suffer in murder and rape, but it was to root out the rebels who had taken shelter among the villagers and the people. And this picture is not seen in America.
Yeah, that's a good history lesson.
Well, if I could just finish that point. You see, when you see Senator Tom Lantos leading the march on the Sudanese embassy, when you see Elie Wiesel, these are Zionists. These are pro-Israeli Zionists. Why are they leading the march? Do you really think that they have compassion for what is going on in Darfur? See, human suffering is human suffering. Don't tell me you have compassion for the blacks that are suffering in Darfur, and you got Palestinians suffering under your nose, and you don't care nothing about that? Come on. If there's 3.5 million dying in the Congo, you say nothing about that? The people that are dying in Uganda, you say nothing about that? No. Then what is the motive sitting up under this? This is what black people have to look at. It is that there's oil in the West, there's gold, there's uranium, and there's a 500-year fight. Like the early plains. You know, if I was a cattle rancher, you know, and you were a sheep herder, and we didn't like the sheep herders, and there's a fight between the cattle ranchers, the sheep herders. Then the railroad comes in, and they start taking the land. So all these boys fighting each other in early American history. This is what's going on in Darfur, and the mistake that the government made. But sincere, they saw these herders that were going to fight against the rebels, and they armed them. But then that 500-year-old hatred that's in them took precedence over rooting out the rebels, and the massacre began, and so forth. So what I say to black people, you know, when the former slave masters who didn't care about lynching, who didn't care about our suffering, who don't care about what happened in Katrina, don't you be deceived that they care about what's happening over there and they don't care what's happening to us here. If you can promote black people calling black women bitches and whores and have no thought about that, you can promote gangster life, guns and drugs, and you have no thought about that, yet the black community is dying as we speak. How in the hell can I think you're concerned about Darfur when we are dying in Harlem and in Brooklyn and the south side of Chicago? Stop it. Black people, wake up to the deceit. We are not there because we were not invited, and that was not our party.
We're going to take a quick break.
We're going to go to line 3. We have Sanater. Is that the correct way of pronouncing your name?
Sister Sanatari.
Sanatari, excuse me. Good morning. You're on open line.
All right,
Good morning.
Sanatari, what's your question for the minister?
First of all, I would like to say Assalamu alaikum, Brother Minister.
Wa alaikum salam, sister.
And my question is, me being a sister in the Nation of Islam, and we know that we have the MGT class, and with the plight of our sisters here in America today, I want to know, what can you say to the sisters to kind of motivate them, so to say, to better ourselves?
Yes.
We know that we have the MGT, but for our sisters out there that we speak with every day, I wanted you to say something to them.
Thank
to
you, sister. Thank you.
kind of help them along.
Thank you.
you.
To our sisters who are listening, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said to us, where there are no decent women, there are no decent men, for the black woman is the mother of civilization. You don't judge the civilization by the men. You judge civilization and the depth of that civilization, the greatness of that civilization, by the woman. When you have women that are denied education, when you have women that are denied the right to express the greatness that God has put within them, then when you suppress and oppress women, you suppress and oppress yourself. When you exalt a woman, you exalt a nation. You know, when they talk about these Muslims who are martyrs, they said, boy, these Muslims want to die because they're going to paradise and there'll be 70 virgins. And these people want to die to get to those virgins. But my dear brothers and sisters, look, the Bible teaches that a virtuous woman is more priceless than silver and gold. The Quran is giving us a picture of paradise. A man surrounded by 70 virgins. The number 7 means infinity. When you are surrounded by virgins, you are surrounded by virtuous women. And when you're surrounded by virgins, then there is no adultery, there's no fornication, so you're in a heavenly state because the women are honored and respected, and their virtue is honored and respected. That's not talking about dying to see that kind of life. But if we lived on this earth when this world is removed and the kingdom of God is established, you will see virgins, you will see virtuous women, you will see men who love and respect their women. You will see highly educated, motivated women. And then you will know, as the Bible says, a wise child maketh a glad father, but a foolish child is the heaviness of its mother. So rise up, black women. Come away from the foolishness of the television and immerse yourself in seeking knowledge. For the greater you are, the greater will be what you produce from your womb. May God bless you.
Okay, let's go to East Harlem and speak with Melvin. Good morning, Melvin. You're on open line.
But, sir, my question is to you is the dilemma that I'm facing in my thinking now in regards to, immigration. Not too long ago, Reverend Sharpton and Reverend Jackson went to Mexico to confront President Fox on his statement that they were coming here and they were doing jobs that even, and I put that in quotes, that even blacks won't do.
I'm not a defender of Vicente Fox, but see, he knows, looking from the outside, that black people are considered the permanent underclass in the United States of America. This is a man looking at the racial situation in America from the outside.
Yes,
and, you know, Reverend Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson or Bruce Gordon or Louis Farrakhan, we are not the rule, we are like the exception. So when you look at the masses of black people, he says, well, my people are taking jobs that even the permanent underclass will refuse to accept. Now, none of us will go out in the hot sun and pick the fruits and vegetables that the Mexicans wish to do. They're great landscapers, but they are taking jobs that we would love to do. And if you go all across America, you see road construction going on. Very few blacks are on those jobs, but the construction people are hiring Mexicans. In the house building boom, we would love to be a part of that, but they hire Mexicans because we now became part of the union. And as part of the union, that meant that we would get higher salary and wage considerations. My dear, dear brothers and sisters, Pharaoh has let you go. But it is you that don't want to go. Years ago, it was Hattie McDaniel's type that was the maid, the butler, and all of that. You go now, go see the movie Sentinel. When the rich man's house is open, it's a fat Mexican woman, it's a fat Latino that's the butler. We are no longer present. And I'm telling you, Pharaoh has dropped you. So in my conclusion, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, when the sea takes a body down and destroys it, it gives that body up to the surface so that the loved ones may claim that body. And if no one claims that body, then the sea destroys it. White folk have let us go, except for the few that are in corporate America, the few that can fit in this society. But the sea now has given us up, like Pharaoh said, all right, Moses, take your people and go. And when Moses was getting ready to take them, Pharaoh had a new thought. He said, no, send the army and kill them. And that's what's going on right now. As we speak, they've let you go. The sea has given you up, but you are not claiming yourself, and it looked like nobody is claiming you, so the sea is taking us down, and the government has said, wipe them out. We are on a death march right now.
Minister Farrakhan?
We're 20 years since the Million Man March. And I know we're going back to Washington 10.
Oh, did you want to come back on, Rich? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry.
In 10, 15. When you look at those 20 years, how far have we come? What's the difference between those 2 decades and us going back to Washington? What was the purpose and what will we try to accomplish from going back to Washington 10-10-15?
The Million Man March accomplished many different things. We didn't go there to petition government. We went there to atone for our lack of acceptance of responsibility as men for our women and our children. We are the natural leaders of our community. But when the enemy brought us into slavery, one of the things that he did and was successful at doing was breaking the black man. And once you are a conquered man, a broken man, then your woman is the booty or the prize of the conqueror. So he had freedom to break us, but then to introduce himself to our women. So my color started coming up, and light skin. Then they put the light against the dark, and the curly hair against the kinky hair, and one who lived on the hill, the one in the valley. You know, the Willie Lynch thing.
Yes, sir.
So now we at the Million Man March began to accept that responsibility. We sent black men first, join a church, a mosque, a synagogue, a place where spiritual values is being taught, because we need that. Second, join an organization of your choice that is working for the liberation of our people. And third, register to vote, that our vote may make a difference. Well, I got a call from SCLC that their phones were ringing off the hook, black men joining. Black men started joining the church. Black men increased membership in the mosques, both what you call Orthodox Islam and the followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in the Nation of Islam. 25,000 orphans were given a home through the Million Man March. And many black men went back home and began to become mentors, entrepreneurs. And so that was a blessing. But the enemy said, oh man, if these black men stay in the kind of unity that we saw at the Million Man March, they'll be powerful enough to change the reality of their lives. And so after that, I went to Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. And what our people don't know, they treated me as if I were a head of state. They were so happy that they saw the Million Man March, which this had never been before. Nearly 2 million black men standing together, shoulder to shoulder, brother to brother. No swearing, no smoking, no drinking, no crime. Just peace on that day. They were mesmerized by what God had blessed us to produce. And so I told them, as I moved through the country for 2 years building, I said, don't you bring no weapon to the Million Man March, because I want to introduce you to the power of the Spirit of God when we are all together in love and accord and agreement with one another. And sure enough, the Spirit was so thick at the Million Man March that it really caught fire all over the earth. So when I went to Egypt, when I went to Sudan, when I went to all the other countries of Africa, they came out and said, man, we see the power of our kith and kin in America. And they were expecting us to become so powerful that we could influence the foreign policy of our government toward the third world. And unfortunately, we now have taken a backward step. We're not as strong as we could be. We're not as strong as we should be.
Why is that?
Because what I would call social engineering. When I was a young man, many years ago, I saw black men in my community in Roxbury, Massachusetts, going out in the morning to work with a little lunch pail. And I would see them when I came home from school, coming back from work. There was a family. There was church. There was community. There was school that we went to, and we became a family. We had gangs then, the gang on the hill, the gang in town, and we would fight sometimes, but never would we kill one another. But now, 40 years ago, I was in Africa, and when I came back, I read in the paper that the wise scientists of America were saying, don't invest in the inner cities because the inner cities are about to explode. So instead of investment in the inner cities, where there always were factories for unskilled laborers to be able to have a job. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough that we could have a decent quality of life that kept the family together. Then all of a sudden, factories closed down. Factories moved out of the inner cities and moved into foreign labor markets. Then we were left in the lurch if we didn't know how to create jobs for ourselves. We have educated people, but we allow others to come into our community to service our needs. And we have a barbecue pit over here, a little nightclub over here, or a little eatery over there. But the real money that is needed to invest in the inner cities is not there. So now, in the inner cities, they call it a food desert, that no good food is being given to the people in the hood. Now you have Mexicans that are here. They're a little wiser, not as broken as we are. So you will see the Mexican stores. You will see 5 or 10 of our brothers and sisters from Mexico come. They come together, they live in a house, they pool their resources. The next thing you know, they bought the house next door, the house across the street, the house down the street. Then you see businesses in the Mexican community. And now the Mexicans, they are very thrifty and they're hardworking. So now they want to pit the Mexican against the black and the black against the Mexican. Here we are, 2 members of the original family of the earth. And the enemy got us looking at each other as the enemy. Now you know, brother, you are not going to pick the fruit like our brothers and sisters from Mexico. You're not going to be in the vineyard like they are picking the grapes. You're going to pass that according to your thinking. So these are your brothers and sisters. So today, we feel it's necessary that we march, not march, but gather in Washington. And when we say justice or else, that's exactly what we mean. Because our Latino family wants justice. Justice because California was once theirs. New Mexico and Arizona were once theirs. Texas was once theirs. Colorado, parts of it were once theirs. So now they're called undocumented aliens. When the undocumented alien is the man that stole the country from the native people and from those who were here before they arrived. So here we are now. We didn't come here as an immigrant. We weren't looking for something that the immigrants came looking for. We came in the holds of ships. And now we built the country. The country is rich because of our slave labor for 310 long years, being sold from plantation to plantation. So most of our people, conquered people, we wear the names of our oppressor. We're not English, but we speak English. So we wear English name. And to our Latino family, you are not Spanish, but you speak Spanish. Because we were enslaved by a European called us Spain, and a European called England, and a European called French or France, or a European called the Dutch, or a European called Belgium, or a European called Portuguese. All these languages called Romance languages belong to the European, imposed on the people that they conquered. It's time now for all of us who have been the victims of tyranny and oppression to see our relationship to each other, come together in a solid wall of unity, then address the government. And the government will have to bow, because our unity will be more powerful, as Elijah Muhammad
Brothers and
taught,
sisters,
than an
we're coming
atomic
to
or hydrogen bomb, Minister.
we're coming to the end of the show. There's a poem that I wrote. Greatness is a gift granted to those who care. And I'm going to say categorically that right now, the greatest leader that we have in the world for Africans is Louis Farrakhan. There is no greater leader than we have than Louis Farrakhan. This man is 90 years old. He's brilliant. He's grown like a cypress tree. He's just spread his wings and his branches. He's extremely brilliant. He knows that there's an international connection. He's joining the African Union, which is a collection of African countries who come together in unity and in strength. He sees the value of coming together in unity with other people of color, with Asians, with Native Americans, with the Jews, coming together where we can do things that will not harm the earth, but help the earth. And when I listen to him about Mugabe, and we look at the things that happened in Africa, and Mugabe is returning the land to its original owners, I think of my grandfather, that in Thomasville, Georgia, he was not a sharecropper. He put whatever resources together, and he owned a plantation with 150 acres. And that acreage was taken from him, and he was driven out of what we call Spring Hill many, many years ago. When we talk about reparations, someone needs to return that land, that property, or at least the value of that land and that property to its original owners. 150 acres. My grandfather had 7 children, and they had to pick up his wife and the 7 kids and move to live with her parents. They forced them. They had to fight the Ku Klux Klan at some point. The Klan came with guns. It was a gun battle, which my folks won. That was prior to them having to move and being forced off of their land. So I know a little bit of something about apartheid. I know a little bit of something about land being stolen and taken away from his people. Do I believe in reparations? Yes, I believe in reparations. And I think that land and that property needs to be returned to its original owners. We still have Spring Hill. Spring Hill is basically a family development. The Hopkins, the James, the Scotts, all of that was a part of our land. And we have a church there, Spring Hill Missionary Baptist Church, that was my great grandfather was one of the founders of that institution. And they have a graveyard where there's free burial, the community taking care of itself. In other words, you heard what I said? In other words, you don't have to buy a plot. If you're part of the church, a part of that community, then you're buried there. And many of my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my father, many of our family members are buried in that cemetery. There's a statue that faces the ocean with a torch that's stretched toward the sea, and a small child who's asking, was this meant for me? There was a statue there was a plaque that was placed on that statue that speaks of liberty. And the small child is asking, was this meant for me? We were some of the original people that founded this country. We were some of the original people that were here prior to this country being founded. In 1619, the first batch of slaves were brought to American land. But we were here before that as explorers. We came here and we are indeed Native Americans. So we have the history of slavery. We also have the history of our own nations that were here. My grandfather, my mother's side, was part Cherokee, and also African, mixed. So that's a reality. And people don't say that they're part mixed because they want to be something else other than they are. It's because they are mixed and they are Native American. We need to do something now. We need to get up off our butts and do something now. All right, before we leave, first of all, I want to again selfishly praise my daughter with the support of her mother. And she set up an organization that they had a play that's going on now, was on this weekend, and that was a tremendous success. Hair Story, Reclaiming Our Crown. Here's a picture here, the original core poem. The play was extremely successful. It was oversold. It's wonderful. I think they got one more performance tomorrow. And hopefully, I'd like to see that play go on the road. I'd like to see it off Broadway, on Broadway. It was so professionally done. And God bless her, and God bless her mother, who worked tirelessly with her to get this play done. There's Maria, one of her associates. Wonderful, wonderful job they did. I was there, and thank God that, hey, I'll be 82 my next birthday, that I'm still on the planet, and was able to see this beautiful piece of artistry. She has a book that she's published. Talking White is one, and then she has a book that talks about a respiratory thing. So she's out there. So I want to thank you again for tuning in to the Richard James Show. And keep your eye and listen to the speeches and proposal that comes from Minister Louis Farrakhan, because he is who we have. I don't know of any other leader that a current leader right now that we can really, really depend on, and that is not caught up in a whole power thing. When we want to look for representation, when we look for our status and our position, we'll look for Minister Louis Farrakhan. I say to all those, Assalamu alaikum, my friends and brothers, peace be unto you. And I want to thank, before I go, I want to thank the Thomas's Chris and his wife for having this station and allowing us and giving us the opportunity and the platform to be able to share reality and to share truth. God bless you, and may heaven smile upon you and be gracious unto thee. Take care. Till next week. I'll see you then. So long. Thank you again for tuning in to the Richard James Show. Our African and our African American programs are set up to educate you on what's going on in this world. And thank you for taking out the time to listen. Let's hear from you sometime also. So this is your neighbor and your friend signing off. Until I see you again next week, and hear from you again next week. So long. God bless.